Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. The verses that inshallah we will be studying today, they relate to the birth of Jesus and how he was conceived without a father, and how Mary reacted to this, and how the Almighty paved the way for his prophethood. And as we will see that he spoke in his cradle, and the Almighty did say that not only will he speak in his cradle about his prophethood, he will also do so when he is in his advanced age. So this is an area, or this is a special segment of Surah Al-Imran in which this miraculous birth of Jesus is discussed, and at the same time the history which ensued as a result is corrected by the Quran. And people of the Gospel, people of the Injil, they are told that there are some segments of their history that need to be corrected. So let's start off with this segment. It says, "Iz qalat al-malaikatu ya Maryam, inna Allaha yubashshiruki bi kalimatin minhu ismuhu al-Masihu Isa ibn Maryam, wajihan fid dunya wa fil akhirati wa min al-muqarrabin, wa yukallimu an-nasa fil mahdi wa kahhalan wa min as-salihin. Qalat rabbi anna yakunu li waladun wa lam yamsasni bashar. قال كذلك الله يخلق ما يشاء إذا قضى أمرا فإنما يقول له كن فيكون." Remind them when the angels said, "O Mary, God gives you glad tidings of a word from him. His name will be Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary. He shall be noble and among the favored ones, both in this world and in that to come. He shall speak in the capacity of a prophet in his cradle, and in elderly age too, and shall be counted among the righteous." She said, "Lord, how can I bear a child when no man has even touched me? He replied, "In this manner God creates what he wants. When he decrees a matter, he need only say, 'Be,' and it is." As you can see, viewers, that this part of the opening section, it clearly depicts how the Almighty will give Mary a child, and this child, of course, would be a child conceived such that there will be no male interference in his conception. And the Quran has actually given certain traits, has mentioned certain traits of Jesus, which we will discuss one by one. So the first thing it says is that he will be like a command, he will be like a word. And this word, of course, referring to the fact that the Almighty just needs to say kun, and that means that be, and the task, what is at hand, is accomplished. So Jesus' birth has been referred to as a kalima, as a word from God, which means that God did not need anything else except to say be, and it was accomplished. So that is why he is called a kalima in the Quran. And then the Quran says, "Ismuhu al-Masih," his name will be al-Masih, or the Messiah. Now we know from ancient traditions that prophets of God, and similarly kings, whenever a new prophet or king would be appointed, then he would be anointed on his forehead by a certain oil. And it does seem that in this case, this was because of the fact that his prophethood was proclaimed by the Almighty in his cradle. So he was called the Al-Masih, the really anointed one, the person or the prophet who was actually, so to speak, figuratively anointed by God himself. It was he who was appointed by God himself. No previous prophet was required to do that. And this was done when he spoke in the cradle. And then it is said, "Wajihan fid dunya wal akhirah," which means that he shall be noble, and the favored ones, both in this world and in the hereafter. So, of course, "Wajihan fid dunya wa fil akhirah" would mean that he is someone who will be there as an icon of guidance for every person. And as far as his birth is concerned, we know that he is someone who will have that the singular property that he would be born without a father. And as of course, we also know from this that as far as this nobility which is mentioned here is the same which is mentioned in relation to John or Johanna, and we know that both of them had this likeness in them. And it is also evident from the Gospel of Luke that it was at the age of 12 that Jesus gave instruction for the first time in the temple. It was at the tender age of 12. And when he spoke at this age, in such a small age, in such a tender age, such was the awe and the grandeur and the eloquence of his speech that the jurists, the Pharisees, the Kahins, and all the staff of the temple, they became dumbfounded. In utter astonishment, they would inquire after the identity of the person who would speak with such majesty as if he was speaking on behalf of God. So when he started to preach in the settlements of Judea, it had a great impact all over. People would come to listen to him in multitudes. Both the jurists and the Pharisees, they were dumbstruck, they were wonderstruck. In order to corner him and reduce his fame amongst masses, they would try to pose different questions to him, and Jesus would answer them in such few words and in such a convincing way that they would have nothing to say in return and would dare not open their mouths. So not much time elapsed before the fame of his nobility spread so much that the masses started to call him the King of Israel and would be full of praise for him. And this is very evident if you read the Bible. So matters reached such an extent that this issue came before the Roman authorities. And we know that it was Herodotus and Pilatus who of course were the rulers at that time later on. But they too, in spite of their power and authority, were awe-stricken before the greatness of Jesus. Another aspect of his aspect of being waji or noble, as this verse says, is that in spite of the fact that he was born without a father and in general circumstances, it cannot be imagined that a child who does not have a father seldom would be respected and honored. But the case of Jesus was entirely opposite. He was born as a result of the word kun, which I was just referred to. And such was the nature of this miraculous command that from the very day he was born, he was regarded as noble in the eyes of the masses to such an extent that no one was invested with it in those times. So that is why he is called wajihan fid dunya wal akhirah. And then, of course, وَمِنَ الْمُقَرَّبِينَ, which means that he will be the favored ones among both in this world and the hereafter. This is obviously very evident that as far as he being the favored one is concerned, he is someone who would be honored by the Almighty, who would be given this special regard by the Almighty, that as far as he is concerned, a whole nation to whom he was sent, who tried to crucify him, they were the ones who went after his life. But the honor that God gave him was not only that he was saved, but at the same time the Almighty announced in this manner that every single person who would be his follower, he will always remain dominant on those who are going to, at times, who have gone far away in denying him. So this was the honor that was bestowed on him in this world, and obviously in the hereafter he would be given a great status as well. So then it says, وَيُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا وَمِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, that he shall speak in his cradle and in his advanced age and shall be counted among the righteous. So we know that this is how it happened, that he spoke in his cradle and he spoke in his kahal. The kahal in the Arabic language refers to an age which is beyond 30. So of course we know that a person who crosses the age of 30 is also called a person who has entered her kahul or kahula, which is an Arabic word to state that a person has entered his 30s. And this shows that his words as a prophet of God, they were uttered when he was in the cradle as a baby, and then later on when he was called to his ministry as a prophet. And when these glad tidings were actually given to Mary, now the verses depict her reaction to these glad tidings. قالت رب أن يكون لي ولدا ولم يمسسني بشر. So she said in absolute bewilderment that how can I bear a child when no man has touched me? When I am not even married, how can I have a child? That is what she has said in such words. And of course, they depict this bewilderment, this amazement on her part. But the reply is something that only God could give. It said, that is, كَذَلِكَ اللَّهُ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ, that God creates what He wants. He does not need any worldly substance to do that. When He creates something, when He wants to create something, all that He needs to do is, as the next part say, إِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. All that He requires, that is required of Him to say is kun, and then that matter is accomplished. And then the next part, of course, depicts how He went upon teaching, and that is وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَالتَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ. Consequently, it will happen thus, and God will instruct him in law and in wisdom, and that is, teach him in the Torah and the gospel. So this verse is very important, and this verse actually outlines, and not only outlines, it depicts the constituents and the components of the two books of God, which is the Torah and the Injil. So the word Al-Kitab refers to the law, and it says that it is actually the Torah, and Al-Hikmah refers to wisdom, and it refers to Injil. So it is like the Quran stating two books or two traits, and then relating each of these two traits separately to each of the two books. So the word Al-Kitab is related to Torah, and the word Al-Hikmah is related to Injil. And we know from the Arabic language that the word Al-Kitab, when it is used in this form, in this sort, it refers to the Sharia. It refers to the divine law. And that is precisely what has happened. We know that the Torah is divine law. If we look at it, we know that the revised canon, which is the Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the Torah, the Pentateuch, we know that the Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy, is the revised law, it's the revised canon, and it gives certain laws, and these laws, of course, are what is depicted by the word Al-Kitab. In contrast, the Injil that was revealed to Jesus, peace be upon him, it consists of a hikmah, which is wisdom. And we also know that as far as Jesus was concerned, he never came to revoke the Torah. In fact, as we shall see from the subsequent words also, and of course from the Injil itself, that Jesus is reported to have said that he has not come to abrogate the previous book. He has not come to do so. And in no way should it be considered that he is abrogating or cancelling out the previous book and now bringing something new. So whatever he did, he was just adding the hikmah part, which is the wisdom, the expediency, the underlying reason of certain directives which might have missed people, so that they could fully understand and grasp the Torah. So basically it is like complementing the Torah. That is precisely what Jesus did. And now we say, it is said, وَرَسُولًا إِلَىٰ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ أَنِّي قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ أَنِّي أَخْلُقُ لَكُم مِّنَ الطِّينِ أني أخلق لكم من الطين كهيئة الطير فأنفخ فيه فيكون طيرا بإذن الله وأبرئ الأكمه والأبرص وأحيي الموتى بإذن الله وأنبئكم بما تأكلون وما تدخرون في بيوتكم إن في ذلك لآية لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. So the next part, what it says is that وَرَسُولًا إِلَىٰ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, and send him forth as a messenger to the Israelites. So you see, this is something that we have to understand, that Jesus, like John, was not merely a prophet. He was not merely a prophet, he was also a messenger. And it is evident from this verse that his messengerhood was specific towards the Israelites. And they had to bear the consequences in this world of denying or accepting him. So when instead of professing faith in him, the Israelites went after his life, the Almighty, according to his law about his messengers, imposed on them the punishment according to which they would remain subservient to the followers of Jesus until the day of judgment. So we can clearly see that as far as Jesus is concerned, he was bestowed with these miracles. And when the words, when he said that I have come with you, I have come to you with a sign, وَجِئْتُكُمْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. So the word ayah occurs as a noun, but you can see that it is undefined. And because it is not defined by alif lam, which actually gives it some specification, it has a very different connotation. And the implication here is that Jesus, peace be upon him, has brought forth a sign from the Almighty, notwithstanding the fact that it manifests in one form or more than one form. So in other words, the fact is that this word, which is in singular, is actually expressing this multiplicity, that he is concerned, he has brought them the sign, and the sign is multifarious, his own sign of being born without a father, his own signs or miracles that were given to him and bestowed to him. As we can see from the next verse, or the next part of the verse, it says that I have come to you with a sign from the, and what is that? From clay I make for you the likeness of a bird. Then breathe into it, and then by God's directive, it becomes a bird. So he just fashions out a bird from clay, he breathes into it, and it becomes a living soul. This is something of course, unprecedented in nature. وَأُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. And I heal the born blind. So akmaha refers to people who are born blind, and abrasa are people who are lepers, who are inflicted with leprosy. So he says that by the grace of God, by God's directive, I do that. And not only that, the next part is even more astounding, and that is وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, that I bring back by God's directive the dead to life. So in these couple of sentences, look at the amount of miracles and look at the amount of extraordinary things that Jesus did. So he would fashion out a bird from clay, he would breathe into it, and it would become a living being. Then he would be able to cure people who were lepers and people who were born blind, because we know that both these diseases, I mean, of course, a person who is inflicted with blindness from birth is something that cannot be cured. And similar was the case with lepers. So he did so. And then finally, another thing that he did was that he was able to bring back the dead from life. And if you read the Bible from various places, you'll see how this miracle is expressed or described in detail, in how he brought back the dead to life on so many occasions. And then this does not stop here. It says, وَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. And I can tell you what you eat and what you stock in your houses. Surely in it is a great sign for you if you are ones who believe. Another thing is that he would be able to tell people what they eat and what they stock at home without being, of course, aware of that. So the reason that the Almighty, it is understood, gave all these miracles to Jesus was that he was supposed to be the last of the messengers of the Israelites. For 2,000 years, starting from Abraham, and then, of course, dividing his progeny into two main branches. One, the Israelites. We know that Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, all of them were prophets of God. And then there was a line of prophets of God, and from Moses to Jesus, although there was no messenger, but there were several minor prophets, and each of them would come and shake and jolt the Israelites and tell them that they must honor their commitment, they must be faithful to God. But in 2,000 years, the time when Jesus arrived on the scene, he was supposed to be the last of the Israelite prophets. So he was given these miracles, these profound miracles, these miracles that could have moved people who were sleeping and were in deep slumber. But lo and behold, they could not do anything. They could not wake up the Israelites from their deep slumber. And it is it's very much plausible that the reason that these miracles were given to Jesus was that he should be able to really make them understand that he is now going away and the die is cast, and now they will have to face their retribution if they don't accept him. But we know from history and we know from the Quran also that this never happened, and they succumbed to all this. And then, of course, as the Quran has said, and we will be studying that in a later verse as well, that they were demolished in a way that in Surah Bani Israel we are told that the immediate adversaries, they were destroyed by God's plan, and that was that Titus, the Roman emperor, he ravaged the temple and he totally destroyed them, killing many Israelites. And the second punishment that was given to them as a result of being the chosen people was that every single person among them, as a community, they were destined to become subservient to the followers of Jesus. And ever since that time, this has been happening, that the Christians or the followers of Jesus have always remained subservient to the followers of Jesus, which are the Christians. So the Jews have always remained subservient to the Christians, and this is a history that we can clearly see being writ large on the annals of mankind. And then it goes on to say, وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيَّ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ وَلِأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَجِئْتُكُمْ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونِ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ رَبِّي وَرَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوهُ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ. Surely in it is a great sign for you if you are ones who believe. So this is it's a sentence which expresses longingness. It expresses this yearning. It expresses this at the same time concern and threat on the part of the Almighty. In kuntum mu'minin, would that you have believed. Had you believed, these would have been great signs for you. And then the actual words, musaddiqan lima bayna yaday, they actually, the implication is that Jesus did not come to abrogate the Torah, as we have just discussed, but to establish it and to fulfill its predictions, regarding the prophets which are to come and which the Israelites can read in it. So basically, as we can clearly see, that Jesus has said this, that I have come not to abrogate the Torah, but to establish it. And then it says one thing more, وَلِأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي حُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ. So, to regard certain items which were prohibited to you, I would like them to declare them to be lawful. And these items are prohibited to them because of the excesses committed by their scholars in religion and because of their baseless religious edicts which they issued as a result. So basically, these things which they made prohibited to themselves, Jesus said, I have come to once again restore them because they have been prohibited by you in a way that is absolutely unbecoming. Inna Allah Rabbi wa Rabbukum fa'budu haza siratum mustaqim. This is a beautiful sentence, as God is my Lord and yours also, hence serve Him only. This alone is the straight path. We know that in the Bible exactly the same words occur, and instead of the word Lord, you'll find the word Father. So Inna Allah Rabbi wa Rabbukum, which are the Quranic words that God is my Rabb and your Rabb. God is my Lord and your Lord. We have the word Father and your Father, my Father and your Father, and this occurs at numerous places in the Injil or the Gospel. So one thing that we have to understand is that in Hebrew, the language in which the Torah was revealed, the word for the Father and God is the same. So the word Abun is used for Father and God. And the word Ibn is used not only for son, but also for servant. So therefore, wherever word Ibnullah is used for Jesus, which means Son of God, it actually refers to the servant of God. And similarly, wherever the word Abun is used for Jesus, which is erroneously translated as Father, it actually means God. Because you see, the word is the same, but it has two different translations, and the context clearly tells us that what exactly is to be implied at a single place. So before we go on and we study the rest of the portion today, if you have any questions regarding what we have studied up till now, please raise them.
I don't see any raised hands, but Dr. Saleem, I have a question. So obviously, God knows everything. He's all-knowing. So when He sent Jesus to the Israelites, I'm sure God also knew that they wouldn't listen to Him or they wouldn't follow His path, because obviously Muhammad was supposed to follow. So what is there any indication of that God was already aware that they wouldn't listen to Jesus at all and they would shun Him?
You see, as far as God is concerned, He knows right up to the day of judgment what's going to happen. So that is besides the point, because everything that is going to happen until the day of judgment, ever since creation, is known to Him. But the thing is that this is just His knowledge. As far as the happening itself is concerned, this will not be driven by His knowledge. It will not take place, as if He has ordained it. It will take place by the will and freedom of people. They will choose to do certain things. For example, people who will deny Jesus, they are not compulsive in this matter. God has not compulsively asked them to deny Jesus. They will do so out of their own will. So what they will do is in God's knowledge. But that doesn't mean that they are going to do it because God has knowledge of that, or because His knowledge is going to have an impact on what they're going to do. They are going to do whatever they are going to do out of their own free will. So, whatever God has destined, again, has to be understood in the light of this, that this destiny that we often speak of is as if we think that God has written everything, and so therefore, how are people to be blamed for what they do? I think this is a very, very, very age-old question and a very important question, and because you have raised it now, it has to be understood once again that it is, destiny does not actually in any way, it's not in the same sense that we use in the Arabic language, the way we use it in many other languages. If you look at the Quran, the word destiny never occurs the way we would, for example, connote it to mean. All that the Quran says, and everywhere, wherever this topic is brought up, God says that it is in His knowledge. His knowledge embraces the past. His knowledge embraces the future. So basically, it is His knowledge. It's like foreknowledge of things. And that foreknowledge is just because of the fact that He's all-knowing. But that foreknowledge is in no way impacts the decision of people. People take that decision out of their own will, and that is precisely why they'll be held accountable because they have chosen something out of their own will. So, I mean, this is how.
There are no more questions, but I'll just continue on this. Just one small question. So, are we to assume that the religion that Jesus brought to the Israelite is the same that Prophet Muhammad brought to us? Were we supposed to had they listened to Christ? Would we have converged as one religion at some point in time?
So this is again a question in which we have been told by the Quran that all prophets of God, not just Jesus or Muhammad, every single prophet of God, starting from Adam, they have brought the same message. They have brought exactly the same message. And it is only that because of their rebelliousness that certain directives were given to the Jews, which were later on abrogated, or there were certain other things which in accordance with civilizational structure were altered. Otherwise, as far as the basis of religion is concerned, which is beliefs and morality, they have always been the same. And as such, the reason that prophets have continued to come is that these teachings have not been preserved by the previous prophets, and they have been, the original language has been lost regarding the previous scriptures. So the need for the final prophet arose so that once he goes away, once he departs, and there is a seal on the institution of prophethood, so now he would be substituted by a book that would be preserved eternally, and no one would be able to tamper with it. So this is how the scheme of God seems to be.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. There are no more questions, so please continue with the session. Thank you.
Okay.
इसमें मेरा सवाल है, आपको मेरा रेस हैंड नजर आ रहा है?
नहीं नजर आ रहा एक्चुअली. अच्छा, शबाना अंसारी.
Okay, please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
Walaikum assalam.
ये वाली जो आयत हम पढ़ रहे हैं, इसमें जो कुछ बनी इसराइल कर रहे हैं या जो बनी इसराइल के हालात हैं, मतलब वो बिल्कुल एंड पर जा रहे हैं, यानी सजा के करीब आ रहे हैं, वो खुदा की मतलब गुस्से के करीब. तो आजकल जो बनी इस्माइल के हालात हैं, जो जैसा कि फलस्तीन में हो रहा है, और वो भी कुछ मुझे मिलते जुलते से ही नजर आ रहे हैं, और कुछ जो डायरेक्टली बनी इस्माइल से नहीं है, हम जैसे लोग जो इस्लाम का नाम लेते हैं, इस्लाम के नाम पे बने हैं, जो हमारी हरकतें हैं, हर कुछ दिन बाद किसी एक को तौहीन के नाम पर कत्ल कर देना, और उसको कुरान और उसकी तौहीन के नाम पे या इस्लाम की जो भी, तो और गैर मुस्लिम दुनिया को इस्लाम और कुरान से दूर कर रहे हैं, और खुदा के गुस्से को जो है वो अपने लिए करीब करते जा रहे हैं. तो क्या ये वो सेम हालात नहीं चल रहे?
So you see, I mean, you have to look at this whole issue in a much broader perspective. I mean, these are small incidents that keep happening. And remember, a happening of 30 or 40 years does not reflect over what happens over centuries. So in a broader sense, yes, you are right that the Bani Ishmael or the Ishmaelites, they are behaving very similarly to the Israelites. Ever since their inception, since the time of Prophet Muhammad, we find very few periods of time in which they have really been honoring their commitment to God, and therefore whenever they don't honor this commitment, the Almighty has said that their promise or His promise with the Israelites and the Ishmaelites is the same, because the promise was made with their forefather, who was Abraham. So basically the promise that was made was with Abraham, that if his progeny sticks to truth and justice, then God will make it dominant over the other nations of the world. But as we can clearly see, that this never happened in the case of the Israelites. And I mean, it did happen for some time, but most of the time they were always flouting or breaching the promise of God. And it is no different for the Ishmaelites as well. So that is why we see that the Ishmaelites are also facing this music from God, or this wrath of God, that they have no status, they have no position in the comity of nations, and they are people who are decadent, they are people who are being governed by the rest of the world. And so that's part of the punishment, because you see, the promise that was made by the Almighty with Abraham was that when he asked that if you're honoring me, you are saying that inni ja'iluka linnasi imama. So he said, Kala wa min zurriyati, is it the same for my children also? The Almighty said, La yanalu ahdi zalimin, that my promise will not relate to people who are oppressive and unjust. So clearly we can see that the Almighty is sticking to His promise, and of course we are passing through that phase as Ishmaelites, or people who are siding with the Ishmaelites, in which we are being, we are facing the same situation as the Israelites did in their own times.
مصدقا لما بين يدي من التوراة
Yeah.
ولهل لكم بعض الذي حرم عليكم.
Yeah.
So what
Yes.
are those things which were haram and then they were made halal through this prophet?
We find their details in Surah Anam regarding certain type of meat which was prohibited to them. Similarly, we find that the camel was made prohibited to them because they thought that Jacob, their own prophet, did not like it, and they thought it was a dislike of the Sharia. So camel was prohibited to them. They had made it prohibited to them, whereas it was, of course, not a prohibited animal. So it was restored back. So you'll find that list in Surah Anam in detail as well.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, Dr. Saleem, just on Shabana's question, if the Quran replaces what the prophets used to do, when we misinterpret the Quran, is it as much of a disrespect as it would be towards a prophet? When we try to misunderstand it, when we spread misinformation about it, is that how we're supposed to interpret it?
I think this becomes only a sin when it is done deliberately. I mean, I don't see people doing it deliberately most of the time. Misunderstandings are because of a lack of one's own understanding, lack of reflection. There are a number of reasons. So this becomes only a crime and a sin when people start to do it deliberately, and there are very, very few instances of this. Okay, starting with verse 52. فَلَمَّا أَحَسَّ عِيسَى مِنْهُمُ الْكُفْرَ قال من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله آمنا بالله واشهد بأننا مسلمون ربنا آمنا بما أنزلت واتبعنا الرسول فاكتبنا مع الشاهدين. So now we find the next part of the story of Jesus, in which, of course, we see that it had become rampant that a very large part of his nation, they did not choose to follow him, they did not choose to obey him. He had just a couple of people who would be around him. These are the famous 12 disciples, and these disciples, about them, it is said that when Jesus felt that these people will only persist in denial, he said to them, he said to his disciples, "Who will be my helper in the cause of God?" The disciples replied, "We are God's helpers. We have professed faith in God, and you bear witness that we have submitted to Him. Lord, have believed in what you have revealed, and in order to fulfill its requisites, have followed the messenger." So it's basically, I think there's a word that has been left out in the translation. It should be, "Lord, we have believed," because the words are Rabbana Amanna. So please have this corrected. The slide should read as, "Lord, we have believed in what you have revealed, and in order to fulfill its requisites, have followed the messenger. So write us among those who have borne witness to him." So the word Hawari is again something that has been debated upon. Most of the scholars say that it came from the Hebrew language, and it has a very similar meaning as the word Ansar has in Arabic. So the word Ansar means helpers and supporters, and Hawari, of course, is something which is also thought to have the same connotation. And it is specifically used for the students of Jesus who professed faith in him, helped him in good and bad circumstances, and finally became exponents of his preaching in each and every settlement of the Israelites. So we know from this that as far as these disciples are concerned, the implication is very clear, that when Jesus felt from the attitude of the leaders and the scholars of the Israelites that it was impossible to convince them, and that they were now adamant on their denial, he sought help from these disciples. And the sentence which he uttered at this instance to seek their help is that, "Man ansari ilallah," who is going to be my helper in the way of God. And the disciples, they actually skipped one step in answering him. They did not say that we are your helpers in going to God. In fact, what he said was, we are nahnu ansarullah, we are God's helpers. And they full well knew that I mean, the word "nahnu ansaruka ilallah," we are your helpers in the cause of God. This is what they would have said. But they said "nahnu ansarullah," which means that clearly they knew that this is like by helping the Prophet himself, it's like helping God in achieving his purpose. God, of course, does not need us, but he has laid down a whole procedure. So by presenting themselves, by dedicating themselves for the cause of God, they call themselves that we will be helping God, we are God's helpers. And then it's not just here. We see that what has been mentioned later on are the requirements and corollaries of what they said as helpers of God. And they said that we profess faith in Jesus, we followed Jesus, and so therefore it should not be that people should think that we would conceal it in any way. They would bear witness to it before other people, and their name should be written up such that they are, on the day of judgment, they are called as people who bore witness to the truth of Jesus himself. So, Rabbana amanna bima anzalta wattaba'na rasula faktubna ma'a shahideen. And then this famous verse occurs, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. This is what happened, and the Israelites started to devise covert schemes against him. And in response, God also devised a hidden scheme, and in such scheming, God is the best. Now, this is a very, very important verse of the Quran, and it needs a little explanation, which I'll try to explain at this instance, because they tried to make these covert schemes, these hidden schemes, to bring Jesus into disgrace. But on the other hand, God also planned his own scheme. He laid out his own strategy to make these people realize how wrong they are in this case. So the schemes that these people or his opponents devised, they have been mentioned in the Bible as well. And if I could summarize some of them, I can say that firstly, these people alleged that he and his disciples were guilty of breaking the traditions of their ancestors and humiliating their elders, so that the emotions of the common man could be inflamed against them. So they would give this impression as if he's a new prophet, he has come to abrogate the Sharia of Moses. So this is how one of the schemes that they floated before the common man was that he's not the right person, he's come to belittle your Sharia, to have your Sharia abrogated. Secondly, and this is also something which is found in the Gospels, and even references can be found in the Quran, that they would send various people to Jesus to ask him questions which could afford them with the material on the basis of which they could issue edicts or fatwas of disbelief and apostasy against him. And this assignment was carried out with great fervor by the jurists and the Pharisees of the Jews. From the parables and similes which are cited in the Bible by Jesus, I mean, we know that the way Jesus spoke was not ordinary prose. He spoke in similes and parables. So what they would do is they would gather material which in their opinion was enough to issue an edict that killing him had become mandatory. Also, thirdly, we can see that in those times the Romans were in political power, and in order to incite them, efforts were made to afford them with appropriate material for this purpose. So initially, questions about the payment of the kharaj were posed to Jesus, so that it could be proven that he forbids people from paying kharaj to Caesar. But Jesus, we know, he silenced his critics with his answers, and he said that give to Jesus what is his. And the way we answered this question, of course, we all know that. So they alleged that Jesus wanted to become the king of Israel, and they wanted to gather this material against him. And we are also able to know that they were able to win over Judas, who was a hypocrite and one of the 12 disciples of Jesus, by bribing him. They were successful in convincing him of disclosing the whereabouts of Jesus and having him arrested. So we know that in the last few days of Jesus, when he was hiding, it was Judas who had actually given this information about where he was hiding. So these were all these covert schemes that did happen. But then we know from various Gospels that the way the Almighty faced these or encountered these covert schemes was that he did not allow Jesus to be in any way crucified. Instead, it was Judas who was crucified, and the thing was that the Jews thought that they had actually crucified Jesus himself. And so this was like a covert scheme on the part of God Himself. Of course, this needs some more details as well. So I just wanted to give you some idea that وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ is a very, very important verse, which actually tells how the Almighty protects His prophets, and He does it in a way that at times people who are inflicting damage on His prophets don't even realize what has happened. And then is قال الله يا عيسى إني متوفيك ورافعك إلي ومطهرك من الذين كفروا وجاعل الذين اتبعوك فوق الذين كفروا إلى يوم القيامة ثم إلي مرجعكم فأحكم بينكم فيما كنتم فيه تختلفون. At that time, when God said, Jesus, I have decided to give you death and lift you up to myself, and I shall purify you from these who have disbelieved in you, and shall grant your followers supremacy over these disbelievers until the day of judgment. Then to me finally you shall all have to return. So at that time I shall give verdict on what you have been deferring. Now this again is a very important verse which tells us that when they became so desperate as to start and go after the light of Jesus, the Almighty did not allow this to happen in any way. He did not allow this to happen in any way. He said that because these people are now after you, I am not going to let them even touch you. I am going to give you normal common death, and your body would be lifted from the face of the earth, so that they are not able to mutilate it, they are not able to distort it. And then the next thing that is announced is that every single person who is your denier will be in subservience to those people who are your followers. Of course, meaning that ever since the time this will happen until the day of judgment, the Jews will always remain subservient to the Christians. And we can see clearly from history how this has happened. And then not only this, the Almighty has also said, He said, "Summa ilayya marji'ukum fa ahkumu bainakum." It seems that there will be still certain differences that will stand unresolved till the day of judgment. And that is why the Almighty has said here that when you come to me, I will have those differences resolved. Which actually, dear viewers, tells us that however much we might try, there are still certain things that will still remain a mystery maybe and still remain unresolved until the end of times. It is God who says that when you come to me, I will have them resolved. He says, فَأَحْكُمُ بَيْنَكُمْ. It is then I will decide and give you the true information. So this also gives us this assurance that at times when we are not able to put across whatever we have in mind, we must always look at this scheme of God, that He has made it to happen in such a way that there are a lot of things in which people are not going to understand other people. So our job is just to try to communicate and not to forcibly convince other people, because there are certain facts which only God will be able to resolve. We are not in a position to resolve them. And then فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَأُعَذِّبُهُمْ عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَمَا لَهُم مِّن نَاصِرِينَ وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَيُوَفِّيهِمْ أُجُورَهُمْ وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. Okay, so it says that thus it is these disbelievers whom I sternly punish both in this world and in the world to come, and they find none to help them. وَمَا لَهُم مِّن نَاصِرِينَ وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ and those who professed faith and did righteous deeds, God gives them their reward in full, and in reality God does not befriend such wrongdoers. So this is an extraordinarily amazing prediction. We can see that as far as God is concerned, it is a blatant proof of God and His court of justice that we can see ever since the times of Jesus' departure, that all people who denied Him, they have remained subservient to His followers. And so therefore we can clearly see that as far as God is concerned, after this, what is that can belie the day of judgment which has been promised by the Almighty? So about the messengers of God, the law of the Almighty is that their adversaries are punished in this very world if they deliberately deny the truth communicated to them. And the Israelites were invested with the position of Shahada by the Almighty. It is the requisite of this position also that they be punished in this world for their sins. So it is in accordance with this law that they lead a life of subjugation to the Christians until the day of judgment. Okay, so now we continue. ذَلِكَ نَتْلُوهُ عَلَيْكَ مِنَ الْآيَاتِ وَالذِّكْرِ الْحَكِيمِ. These are our revelations and a reminder replete with wisdom that we are reciting to you. Of course, this is what the Prophet Muhammad himself is being told. Now, the address has shifted to Prophet Muhammad near the end, and it says that this current discussion basically has been narrated to assure him on the attitude adopted by his addressees. He is informed that the real truth about Jesus is what has been told. The myths that have been fabricated by the Christians in this regard are nothing but departures from the truth. So, Zalika natluhu alayka min al-ayat wa zikr al-hakim. This is the truth that I have told you. That is what the Almighty is telling the Prophet. And inna masala Isa indallahi ka masali Adam khalaqahu min turab summa qala lahu kun fayakun الحق من ربك فلا تكن من الممترين فمن حاجك فيه من بعد ما جاءك من العلم فقل تعالوا ندعو أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين. So, in the sight of God, Jesus is like Adam. God created him from clay, then commanded it be, so it becomes. This alone is the truth from your Lord, therefore you should not be in any doubt. Then if they still dispute with you in this matter, even after you have received this knowledge, say, come, let us call our children also, and you also bring your children. We call our wives too, and you too bring your wives, and we ourselves and you also come. Then supplicate and pronounce the curse of God on every liar. So this famous verse of Mubahala, on which we would be seeing how the Almighty has given this final ultimatum. But before that, we can see that the verse has clearly said this, that when Adam did not become a deity, when he neither had a father or a mother, how can people regard Jesus to be a deity? So this verse has a very important message to say. Inna masala Isa indallahi ka masali Adam. So it says that when Adam was born, he didn't have a father or a mother. And if you claim that Jesus is God because he does not have a father and his father is God himself, then this is a mockery, because look at Adam. He did not even have a mother. So if that is true, then you have to understand that as far as Adam and Jesus are concerned, how can they be regarded differently? If you regard Jesus to be the Son of God in any way and a deity, then the same should be with Adam. So this is like God showing the way to the Christians that if this is the case, then this is an inconsistency in their behavior, and they have to realize that this never happened. So the sentences that occur after that, we know that in these verses it shows that the direction of address is towards common Muslims. When they should now have no doubt that the real truth about Jesus is what Quran has stated. Everything else is mere fabrication. And so therefore, the anger which exudes in these verses, which says, Ta'alau abna'ana wa abna'akum wa nisa'ana wa nisa'akum, which means that they should call forth people the way they should be done so. And the suppressed part of these verses clearly say that as far as this verse is concerned, the word nabtahil actually means to pray or to beseech or to ask the Almighty. So it is as if it is being said that if this is what you would like, then let us get together and pray to the Almighty that if we are wrong, then let the curse of God be on us. But we know from history, although this challenge was given, but it was not accepted by them, and they shied away from this promise. This verse that we know, that is from the Quran. Inna haza lahuwal qasasul haq wa ma min ilahin illallah wa inna allaha lahuwal azizul hakim fa in tawallahu fa inna allaha alimun bil mufsidin. Undoubtedly, this alone is the true account, and in reality there is no deity but God, and it is God only who is the mighty and the wise. Then if they show indifference, God certainly knows such mischief mongers. So we can see clearly that as far as the Quran is concerned, it has given this very strong ultimatum, and it has said that inna haza lahu al qasasul haq, that this is the true account of Jesus. And you have to understand that divinity is only for God. Jesus has no share in it. Whatever status he has is on the basis of a servant, of being a servant of the Almighty and his messenger. And the address here is in general, as we can see, it is evident from the preceding discourse that it is directed at the Christians. They are being said that if they believe him to be the Son of God or God himself, then let it be that they come and face this challenge. But we know that this never happened. So, inna haza lahu al-qasasul haq wa ma min ilahin illallah wa inna allaha lahu al-azizul hakim. Fa in tawallaw fa inna allaha alimun bil mufsidin. قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله فإن تولوا فقولوا اشهدوا بأننا مسلمون. Tell them, O people of the book, come to what is common between you and us, that we should worship none but God, associate nothing with him, and none of us should make anyone except God as our Lord. Then if they turn away, tell the believers, bear witness that we are Muslims. So the important thing that we have to understand here is that the Quran says that the best way to talk to the Christians, to talk to the followers of Jesus, not only in those times but even today, is come to that common ground. Ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawa'im baynana wa baynakum. And what is that kalima which is common? What is that premise which is common between the two? That is the kalima of Tawheed. And that is precisely what has been mentioned in the very next part of the verse, and that is La Allah na'buda illallah. We shall not worship except one God. So in other words, the Christians and the Muslims, they are told, in fact, the Muslims are addressed and told that instead of disputing other things, the commonality first should be brought up, and that is Tawheed is something which is common to them. They believe in one God, although the way they believe in it is something that needs to be corrected, but primarily they are monotheists. So therefore, monotheism is the thing that should bring together the two religions. It is belief in one God that should be the basis of commonality, the basis of preaching and invitation. And this is, of course, a very, very important guideline for all times to come. That whenever you're calling people towards your own stance, then look if you have something in common with them. Because if you have something in common with them, that should be the starting point. That should give you an edge, and that should also restore a lot of confidence amongst the two. Because when they know that they have a lot of commonality, then of course, to start off with commonalities is something which gives this tremendous boost to any differences that might be remaining. And in this case, we all know, and I've said this a number of times, I would like to say it again, that in the whole corpus of the Quran, nowhere are these Christians called as mushriks or polytheists, in spite of the fact that they believe Jesus to be the Son of God. They can be called deviant monotheists, because you see, they do not admit to monotheism. Any person who does not admit to monotheism, to polytheism, cannot be called a polytheist. So Christians, they do not admit to polytheism. They admit to monotheism. And God has actually given this credit to them by saying that, well, okay, if you call yourself monotheists, we will also call you monotheists, but we would like to correct your monotheism, your concept of monotheism. And that is, as I said, precisely why in the whole corpus of the Quran, the mushrikun of Mecca, they have been called idolaters, they have been called polytheists, but not at a single place do we find the Quran calling the Ahlul Kitab. And remember, the Ahlul Kitab of those times, the people of the book of those times, both these groups, the Jews and the Christians, regarded one deity to be the Son of God. So the Jews of Arabs called Azra to be the Son of God, and Christians called Jesus to be the Son of God. In spite of this, the Quran still did not call them to be polytheists. The Quran did not call them to be mushrik. Why? As I just said before, because they themselves do not admit to polytheism. They say it is monotheism, and they try to explain this multiplicity in a way that the Quran does not accept, but it does not in any way negate them that they are not in any way monotheists. So with this, we come to an end to today's talk, and if you have any questions regarding the part that we have studied, please raise them, and after that we can also take some general questions.
Shazia Khan, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब I have a
Salam.
question about the ascension to heaven versus crucifixion. So Allah Ta'ala told Hazrat Isa alayhi salam at the time that Anni mutawaffiyaka wa rafiuka wa mutahiruka. But did the disciples know? Or did they just witness the crucifixion? Did they know and they hid the truth? Or did they not know and the truth only came with the Quran, with the verses that this is the ayah that we're...
Yes. Yeah. It seems that it came with the Quran. They thought that they had crucified Jesus. That is how they behaved in the next 500 years until the arrival of the Quran. It was only the Quran that actually divulged the truth to them. But even then they did not accept. So you see, even after the Quran told this, right up to this day, today, they still don't accept this. So it's like they thought that they have crucified Jesus, and until today, this is we are 30th of June 2024, right up to today, they still believe the same thing.
So if they, but this is what they witnessed and they didn't know any better, but after reading Quran or after listening to Prophet Muhammad, they were supposed to change their opinion. But
Right.
even then, can they still exist as Christians, believing in the Christ and not believing, not being or converting to Islam? Can they still, will they still be called mu'min or?
That is their choice. But you see, the Quran has repeatedly in Surah Nisa and in Surah Al-Imran asked them to profess faith in the final prophet, because they had lost their original scriptures and they had lost their original teachings, and we know that it was Pauline Christianity that was reigning supreme until the arrival of Prophet Muhammad. True Christianity had been lost. In fact, true Christianity was something that even was a misnomer, because we know that the Quran has called them as Nazarenes. The word Christianity itself is a much later invention. They were Nazarenes, and as far until the time that they remained Nazarenes, they were true people who actually waited for the final messenger. And it was these Nazarenes who, when they came to Arabia, they actually converted and they became Muslims themselves and followers of Prophet Muhammad.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. Shabana Ansari, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
डॉक्टर साहब, ये जो अभी शहनाज सवाल कर रही थी, तो इसमें क्या एलिमेंट ऑफ डाउट का होना, क्या ये खुदा की स्कीम का हिस्सा है कि वो, क्योंकि एक टेस्टिंग ग्राउंड है जमीन, तो इस वजह से लोगों को खुद इसको
it was like a punishment. It was like a punishment from God that they tried to kill his messenger, and God not only hid the fact, hid the truth. At the same time, he made them remain in this misconception for 500 years as a punishment for what they did.
और ये वाली आयत जो बता रही है कि क्रिश्चियंस का गलबा रहेगा क़यामत तक, तो मुसलमानों के सुहाने ख्वाबों का क्या होगा कि कोई आएगा और फला आएगा और वो मुसलमानों को
there is no such thing authentically reported in scripture, in the Quran or in any hadith, that there is someone going to come and will create a new order, or new world order in which Muslims will reign supreme. I think Muslims have, or believers, as I can say, they have already attained their supremacy, and now the baton has been passed as the Quran indicates, and the Bible also tells us, to the followers of Gog and Magog. So it's now they who are going to rise and reign supreme. And if we look at the book of Revelations of the Bible, which has proven to be true word by word until now, if it still stands true to what it says, then the final rise will be of Gog and Magog, which of course is the rise of China, as we know that is happening at this time.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. We have a question in the chat. Are these verses, I'll give you death and lift you up to me, in the context when he was tried to be crucified, or these verses simply give an assurance to his prophet that his opponents will not be able to harm him and he will be given death and kept away from his opponents?
It is both, actually. It gives him assurance, and at the same time it also tells them that they will not be able to harm him. Whenever people go after the life of God's messenger, the Almighty does not let this happen, especially when they are in their preaching phase. So that is what has actually happened. And not only that, the Quran has at one place said, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ, they neither killed him nor did they crucify him, وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. The matter was made ambiguous to them. And here in this verse 55 of Surah Al-Imran, it also seems that the body of Jesus was also confiscated, so that, if they have found the dead body, God would have given death to him naturally, but he did. So had they found his dead body, they might have mutilated it, distorted it. So God himself did not even allow this to happen. So he lifted his dead body to his own self, which of course means that his angels just took it away, so that this body could not be left to what they could do against it.
So, at the time of Hajj, is there any indication why people, when they are in the Maidan of Arafat, Muzdalifah, or Mina, they cannot wear any deodorant and cologne? These are just questions that young adults sometimes raise when, people coming back from Hajj report these things. If you can just throw some light on it.
Yes, because you see, basically it's the restriction that we have to follow when we are wearing the ihram. So the ihram itself is a symbol. It's to be understood as a symbol. It's a symbol that you have dedicated yourself to God, which means that any worldly embellishment is something that you'll not do until these 3 or 4 days elapse, in which you are going to totally dedicate yourself to God. So there is no monasticism in Islam, but these couple of days in which it is as if you have cut yourself off from every adornment, every embellishment, every worldly thing that can go again in favor of the world. You've just given it up, and you have totally dedicated yourself for a couple of days, as if you are someone who's possessed with the love of God, with the dedication of God, with praying and with looking up to Him, with talking to Him, making supplications. So it's like a time in which, as if you have no time to adorn yourself for these things, and you are totally concentrating towards God. And these are basically restrictions of ihram. So when you're wearing the ihram, you cannot have any perfume on, you cannot cut your hair or your nails, because you see, all these things, they basically present yourself as someone who has interest in these worldly things. So it's just like a few days in which God wants us to totally dedicate ourselves to Him.
Okay. And is there any indication in the Quran for this, or is it
You
just
see, remember,
hadith?
all these worship rituals, they have been passed down through us through the Sunnah, and that is through Tawatur. So we don't find, just as we don't find any details of the 5 prayers or the rakats of these 5 prayers. Similarly, the fact that zakat is 2.5% or 10%, we don't have any mention of this in the Quran, because this is what the Sunnah tells us. It's a parallel source of religion with the Quran, and it has been transmitted to us through Tawatur, perpetual concurrence, and that's, as I said, is an independent source.
We have another question in the chat, Dr. Saleem, and this is regarding actually our session for today. Did Jesus return to his people after crucifixion?
He did not. This is what the Bible says. The Quran does not say so. The Bible says that on his 3rd day he rose from the dead, and he even met his disciples. That is the statement of the Bible, not the Quran.
Dr. Sahib is Abid from UK. Dr. Sahib, I got a question, I got confusion. How the construction of word ilah and al become Allah?
It's very easy. This is what we call amalgamation in the Arabic language. Al-ilah, whenever 2 lams they combine, one of them gets dropped, and then there is a shadda which is added to it. That is how it becomes Allah.
Okay, thank you for that. Riaz, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Saleem, Doc. One of the in the ayah that you just read, it says that Jews will be under the domination of Christians until the eternal. It seems the other way around, going round. What do you think?
Well, it is a farce basically. It looks as if it is the other way around, whereas it is not. It is more like, I'll give this example to you, that when you have some servant, for example, who runs the house for you, you are the owner of that house, but he becomes so efficient and so, he's so disciplined, and he's so, he does work in such a way that you become so dependent on him that it looks as if he's running the show. But the fact is that he has just been given the power by you yourself. So you are the person who is in charge, but the other person appears to be in charge because he looks like doing all the things. But he would not have done so had that charge not been given to him. This is exactly what is happening between the Christian and the Jews. Although the Jews are looking dominant as you said, it looks like the other way around. In fact, it is not so. If the Christians withdraw their support today, they can never be like that. It's like a person who is looking after them in such a way that they have become so dependent on him that now it seems to the world that it is they who are ruling.
If the only purpose of life is to prepare for life in the hereafter, then this approach may defy the stimulus for research and innovations and endeavors for advancement in science and technology. Is this the reason that the Muslim world has left behind in these areas, and in the non-Muslim world that is actually advancing in terms of research, science, and technology?
Well, this is what people think Islam stands for, but I don't agree with that. I mean, when we think that Islam is something that, or religion is something which is left for you to prepare for the hereafter and not do any contribution in this world, this is not the worldview of the Quran. This might be the worldview or the view of certain segments of people who exist in our Muslim Ummah, but the Quran does not say so. It tells us that we have been given this opportunity to prove ourselves in this world by giving whatever we can in the form of our contribution to this world. We have been given with a lot of talent, with a lot of characteristics and abilities, because these are all God-given. So that's a given that we have to try our best and contribute in this world as much as we can. But at the same time, whenever there is a clash between the requisites of this world and that world, then we have to give preference to the requisites of this world. That is what the Quran says. So it would be erroneous to believe that this life has been created just so that we can prepare for the next life. That is an incomplete sentence.
Okay. And then the second part is, does Quran encourage to endeavors in science and technology, and at what places?
You see, the Quran does not even bother to comment on this, because you see, the Quran has given us this personality, and it knows that we have this natural drive of curiosity, this natural inclination found in us to question things, to go and question the world and bring out new ideas. So remember, this is not even the ambit of the Quran. The Quran has given us common sense, it has given us intellect, it has given us experience, and it wants us to exercise that. So you see, it is only in affairs where we might falter that the Quran does interfere. For example, our relationship with the Almighty. For example, what's going to happen in the life hereafter. It is incorrect to think that the Quran is going to guide you in every single matter of life. That is not what the Quran is meant for. That is an erroneous deduction that has been made in recent times. The Quran has a very specific sphere. Other than that, the Almighty has given us a personality. That personality has its own driven mechanisms and its own momentum, and we should be driven with those mechanisms that we have inwardly and express our personality. And when we do so, we should always be morally sensitive. That is all. Otherwise, that is something which is naturally found in us, and the Almighty does not place any restriction on it, unless, of course, the issue is moral.
Okay. Shabnam, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
थैंक यू सर, अभी आपने, अगर तो ये क्वेश्चन बहुत दफा होता है कि अभी आपने क्वेश्चन के आंसर में कहा कि ज्यूज जो है, अगर क्रिश्चियंस अपनी सपोर्ट विथड्रॉ कर लें तो दे विल नॉट बी एबल टू स्टैंड. तो सर क्या आपको, अब एक तो बात सर मुझे बहुत ये लगती है कि उनकी वीकनेसेस हैं वो उनके पास. जैसे क्लिंटन ने जरा सा कुछ हिलने की कोशिश की तो उसका पूरा स्कैंडल बन गया. अगर इस बात को छोड़ भी दिया जाए तो सर क्या सारी दुनिया के क्रिश्चियंस के पास राइट एंड रॉन्ग की कोई सेंस नहीं रहेगी जो कुछ वो कर रहे हैं?
No, this is not a question of right and wrong. You see, this is a totally different thing that the Quran has presented. It has said that their punishment of the Israelites is that because they were chosen for this position of being witness to the truth, and because of the fact that for 2,000 years prophets continue to come to them, now if they have gone after the life of the last of the Israelite prophets, this is a punishment that they will have until eternity. And to look at it another way, you'll find that in Surah Hashr it is said that this punishment is basically of exile. They'll gather at one place, they'll gain power, and then they'll be pushed away from that place and then go to another place and again gain power. So this is like exile till eternity. So if you look at that exile until eternity is taking place, and at the same time, wherever you find these Jews to be in a position of power, it is because of their Christian masters. So I think this is regardless of the right and wrong the Christians are doing.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Saleem, I have a question while I'm waiting for more people to raise their hands. So, wuzu and tayammum seem and appear very easy when you make it just a normal part of your life and you say your prayers 5 times a day. And now my question to you is that, being a Muslim who is, moving all the time or is busy or working, is the ritual of prayer, if we are more casual about it, for want of a better word, casual is probably not the right word. If we are traveling and we say our namaz, we park our car on the side and just do the actions. If somebody's out and about at the gym and they don't want to miss that particular time, it's Maghrib time and they want to say it at the right time, is it more afzal to delay the namaz and do the proper wuzu and come home, or just do it on the move? But then when you're living in the western part of the world, you're always on the move, so it seems that just becomes a part of your routine. What is your understanding of it?
I think personally, I always prefer praying on time, and so I would try my best to arrange my day in a way, if it is in my control, that I be in a particular situation so that I can peacefully offer the prayer. But you see, this is not always an option that you have. So in that case, whatever you are doing, it is best to make the best out of it. And if you are maybe traveling or you are in a sport or something, you have so many options. Maybe you can combine your prayers, and of course you can pray while standing. You can do tayammum if wuzu is not, if water is not available. Similarly, you can just pray the first rakat. If you're sitting on a chair or you're driving a car, even then you can pray. So you see, the purpose of the prayer has to be understood, that it is an acknowledgement of God's blessings on our own selves. And if we keep on remembering these blessings, it is for our own good, because it is how we keep connecting to God, how we are able to avoid evil, how we are able to be God oriented. So if you see, if the importance of the prayer is understood, then these small things, they will not become a hindrance. You will look forward to the prayer. It is only when we don't have a deep understanding of why do we pray, do such things become bigger in our eyes. So see, if you are able to understand that this small connection with God is going to energize you, it's going to make you realize that you are someone who owes an obligation to God. It makes you realize that you are enjoying certain blessings from God. You need to thank Him for that. So you'll always wait for the opportune moment that when it arrives, I'm going to thank God. So I think we should lay more stress on the philosophy and the wisdom of the prayer. If we do so, such things will become easier for us.
I 110% agree with you, but when you present it like this to a general audience, or just sitting there having a discussion, it seems that people think that we are casual about the prayer, because obviously there's a ritual involved with the wuzu. So the understanding then is that you have to focus on the kindness or the existence of God between each prayer, because when you say it 5 times a day, kind of that becomes stronger, just the concept of God. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think you see that is something that we have to do all the time. I mean, acknowledging God's favors has to be done, as the Quran says, "Allazina yazkuruna Allaha qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubihim," that while sitting, standing, and lying on our backs, we should continue to acknowledge God. So these are informal ways, but you see, God has fixed a formal way as well, because human beings are such that they need this discipline as well. So it's like a discipline and a lack of discipline both coming together. You can do so between the prayers in any way you like, whenever you like, at whatever time you like, in whichever way you like. But then there is a disciplined way as well, in which God wants us to have that acknowledgement done. Because if you don't have that disciplined way programmed, then as you can see from history, people will go to extremes. Either they'll just give up, or they will be so religious that they'll just forsake the world. So I think God has made this beautiful balance, in which you are told that there are certain times in the day in which you just need to be attentive, and you can do it in the least possible way. For example, by just praying the mandatory first rakat, and if you have time, you can pray more. And for the rest of the time, whenever you see something, you say Subhanallah. When you thank God, you say Alhamdulillah. When you do something bad, you say Auzu Billah, so that God protects you. Similarly, when you do a sin, you say Astaghfirullah. So these are also utterances that connect you to God. So these are informal ways of remembering God, and in between them, they are punctuated by formal ways of remembering God.
Okay. Another question in the chat: is contraceptive surgery permissible in Islamic Sharia?
When I understand this to mean that you have an operation such that you will not able to conceive anything in future. If that is what is implied, then yes, why not? If a woman thinks that she would not like to conceive, and if the husband also agrees, so that repeated pregnancies are avoided, then yes, this is okay.
We just have 5 minutes left. Ruhi Rasool, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is from one of the previous lessons, Mary's custodianship. What was that tradition that they would throw pens and decide about the custodianship? Would they throw them then in water
No,
or
that's
on table?
just it's like throwing your dice. Ayyuhum yakfulu Maryam. As you can see, it's like throwing dice. It's very similar to throwing dice, that a person would say that if this number comes up, then I will be in charge, and if some other number comes up, I'll be in charge. It was something very similar to that. We don't know the exact way that would be done, but we know that it would be something very, very similar to throwing dice.
So, sir, why were they so excited about Mary that they want her custodianship? What was so
because
special?
of the fact that when you see, she was a very noble and a pious lady, and because the fact she was the daughter of Imran, he himself was someone who was very revered, and she was someone who wanted to dedicate herself as well. The child and herself for the cause of religion. So I think this was something very coveted for every single person to be to vie for her custodianship.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for that. So, Dr. Saleem, what is the difference between a messenger and a prophet? Do we just have the 4 messengers who got the book, or everybody else is just a prophet?
No, that is not correct. Messengers of God, they are a special category of prophets of God who decide the fate of their nation in this world, which means that the truth is communicated to their nation in such a ultimate form if they have no excuse to deny it, and their fate is decided in this world. Which, for example, Moses and Jesus, and there were several other messengers of God. All these messengers, in the case of all these messengers, their nation's fate was settled in this world. They were rewarded and punished in this world. This does not happen with prophets of God. Prophets of God are more like preachers, and their nations can even kill them, as happened in the case of Zachariah and in Johanna.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. We had a wonderful session today. Thank you to all the participants.